Welcome friends and welcome to Bani Nirmal, and in this tutorial video I shall tell you about the differences in between apoptosis and necrosis. And you know that usually cell death is occurred by two processes. One is necrosis and another is apoptosis, and here I shall tell you that how necrosis and how apoptosis is occurred. And you all know that the apoptosis is nothing but this is a programmed cell death, and this is highly genetically regulated, okay, and many genes are actually involved in apoptosis, and also the ATP is very important factor for the apoptosis. But in cases of the necrosis, no ATP is required, and this is usually the accidental cell death. So the cell death is occurred by two ways. One is necrosis and another is apoptosis, okay. And the apoptosis, usually the death is harmful in our body, but apoptosis is very important for our body for maintain the integrity of the adult tissues and also for the proper developmental program. If the problems in apoptosis is occurred, then the various types of diseases like the Alzheimer's disease or the acquired immunodeficiency syndromes can be appeared, okay. Many morphological and the physiological changes is occurred in during the time of apoptosis, and the apoptic bodies is formed during the time of apoptosis, and also the bleeding of the plasma membrane and the nuclear membrane can be seen during the time of apoptosis, okay. And during the time of necrosis, inflammation is occurred, but in cases of the apoptosis, no inflammation is occurred, right? And the apoptosis is usually occurred in two phases. One is the latent phase. So apoptosis is usually occurred in two phases. One is the latent phase, and latent phase is actually the preparatory phase for apoptosis, okay. And during this time the cell actually prepare for apoptosis, okay. The cell actually prepare for their own death, for their own suicide. So this is actually called as the latent phase, okay. And the latent phase is divided into the two sub phases. One is the condemned phase, so condemned phase, and another is committed, right? If cell receive any death signal, then the cell will be prepared for apoptosis, right? But during the time of the condemned phase, the cells can recover. So cells can recover, okay. But if the cell enters into the committed stage, the cell cannot recover. Cell cannot recover, okay. And this must die. So this cell must die, and usually this will take a huge time, right? So latent phase usually takes a huge time, but after the latent phase, the cell undergoes into the execution phase. So cell undergoes into the execution phase, and during this time the many changes is occurred in execution phase. So changes in the morphology of the cell, okay. And here I shall tell you that, and in this video tutorial I shall tell you that what types of changes in the morphology of a cell which is actually performing the apoptosis. And in this video tutorial I shall tell you that what types of the changes is occurred in an apoptic cell, okay. Now, what will be the differences in between necrosis and apoptosis? Usually, the necrosis is called accidental cell death. So, this is accidental cell death, right? Accidental cell death, okay. And this is usually occurred by any chemical or physical trauma okay. And necrosis is occurred on those cells which are damaged, okay. So necrosis is seen in cases of damaged cell, but apoptosis is highly regulated process, okay. And apoptosis is usually occurred by death signal or by lack of survival signal. So this is the first differences in between apoptosis and necrosis, right? So apoptosis is the programmed cell death, but the necrosis is actually the accidental cell death, right? Now suppose this is an organ, let's say this is the hand, okay, and if any damage is actually occurred in this region, in this portion, the damage or the trauma is occurred, so this region is damaged, okay. And if we look a few portion in this region, we can see that there represents many cells actually, and I am drawing these cells. So these are the cells and which actually receive the trauma, okay, or these cells are damaged by any physical injury or any other. So these cells actually receive the trauma, or these are actually damaged by any of the physical injury, okay. And so these are the nucleus actually, and inside this nucleus the chromosomes are present, okay, and these are the organelles, cellular organelles, okay. And due to the trauma, the first step is that this increased permeability of plasma membrane. So increase permeability of plasma membrane, or integrity of plasma membrane losses, okay, and this causes the entry of water. So and so these are actually the chromosome, and this actually causes the entry of water, okay. So water enters into this damaged cell, okay, and so the cell swelling, the cell becomes swelled, and there represents the cellular organelles in the cytosol. So these are the cellular organelles, right? So these are cellular organelles, okay. And the swelling of the cell is occurred, and this actually activate the hydrolytic enzymes, or this actually activate the hydrolytic or the lytic enzyme. So activate the many of the hydrolytic enzyme, okay, and this will causes the breakdown of organelle, so the organelle becomes break. So this will causes the breakdown of this organelle, and at the final stage the content, the cell content actually released to the environment. So the cell content are released into the environment. So these are the cell content, and this will be released into the environment. So cells content released into environment or outside of the cell, okay. And at the final stage the inflammation is occurred, so this will leads to inflammation. And you know that the inflammation is a type of innate immunological barrier, okay, and various symptoms can appear during the time of inflammation. That is the redness, that is the swelling, and also the diabetes and the margination of the Wbslst. So these characters can be seen during the time of inflammation. So during the time of the necrosis, the accidental cell death is occurred, and when a trauma is imposed into the cell or in a region of our body, so the plasma membrane actually loses its integrity, okay, and so water enters into the into the cells, into these damaged regions, okay, and so this actually activate, and the swelling of the cells is seen, and this actually activate the many of the hydrolytic enzyme, okay, and this hydrolytic enzyme actually causes the breakdown of the cellular organelles, and this cellular organelles will be released at the outside of the environment, or this will come out from the cell, okay, and this actually causes the inflammation. So this is actually the process of necrosis, and by which a cell, by which the many cells becomes died, right? Now the apoptosis, and during the time of apoptosis, so this is the cell, and I shall tell you about the stepwise process of apoptosis, or the how this apoptosis is usually occurred and how the death of the cell is occurred. So these are actually the intercellular junction, okay, and this is the microvilli, and these are the nucleus, this is, and there represents the organelles, okay. So mitochondria, Golgi body, ribosome, lysosome, so these are actually the organelles, right? So these are organelles, and due to the receiving of the death signal, or receiving death signal, and the first step is that microvilli and intercellular junction, and intercellular junction will be broken, okay, and the cell which undergoes into the apoptosis becomes shrink, okay. So during the time of necrosis the swelling is occurred, but during the time of apoptosis the shrinkage is occurred, okay. So this is another important point, okay. Now so here are the normal cell actually, so this is the normal cell, and these are the organelles, okay, and this is normal cells, and this is organelles, microvilli, and the cells becomes shrinkage, okay, or the shrinkage of the cell is occurred, and this will, and these cells actually detached from the neighboring cells, okay, because the intercellular junctions becomes broken down. And the next step is the condensation of this, of the chromosome, right? So these are actually the organelle, and the condensation of the chromosome, so chromosome becomes hypercondensed, right? So this is another important point. These cells, the chromosomes actually, the hypercondensed chromosome actually marginated towards the nuclear membrane, okay, and there are presence of cellular organelles. So margination of condensed chromosome, right? Next, blebbing of nuclear membrane and plasma membrane of this apoptic cell. So what is the blebbing? This will produce the finger-like structure, right? So the blebbing of the nuclear membrane and plasma membrane, right? So this is the plasma membrane, show the blebbing, and in this blebbed region the chromosome and the remnant of the cellular organelles are present. So these are the remnant of the chromosome, and the remnant of the cellular organelles are actually present in this blebbed portion. So there will be presence of many remnant of the cellular organelles, okay, and after then this will produce the many apoptic bodies, okay. So this will produce the many of the apoptic bodies, and these apoptic bodies contain the chromosome and the remnant of this cellular organelle. So apoptic bodies is very important, and in these cases you have seen that the cellular content do not actually released from the cell. Actually this will produce the apoptic bodies, okay, and then these apoptic bodies produce the epitope. So this will produce the epitope, right, and this epitope actually causes the engulfment by surrounding cell. So these are the surrounding cell and which actually phagocytosed these apoptic bodies, right. So this is actually the process of apoptosis, and during the time of apoptosis another important event is occurred, that is the plasma membrane loses its asymmetry, okay. So this is another important point, and phosphatidyl serine, which is usually found in the inner plasma membrane, and these are distributed both of leaflet, okay. And you know that the phosphatidyl serine is usually present in the inner leaflet of the plasma membrane, but during the time of apoptosis the phosphatidyl serine will be distributed in both leaflets, okay. So necrosis is actually the accidental cell death, in the chemical or the physical trauma or the accident actually causes the necrosis, but apoptosis is a highly regulated process, and due to the receiving of the death signal or the lack of the survival signal actually causes the apoptosis or the programmed cell death, okay. And the next differences is that is during the time of the necrosis, in this will increase the permeability of the plasma membrane, but during the time of the apoptosis, the microvilli and the intercellular junctions becomes broken, okay. And also the plasma membrane actually loses its asymmetry, and the phosphatidyl serine can be seen in the both leaflets of the plasma membrane. And the next is that during the time of necrosis the water enters into the cell, but during the time of apoptosis the cell shrinkage is occurred, okay, and the cell becomes shrinked, but during the time of necrosis the cell actually becomes swelled, or the swelling of the cell is occurred, okay. And the necrosis actually activate the hydrolytic enzymes, but during the time of apoptosis no hydrolytic enzymes will be activated. Actually the no organelles can be broken down, and the hypercondensation of the chromatin is occurred, and the margination of this chromatin in the nuclear membrane, okay. And the bleeding of the nuclear membrane and the plasma membrane can be seen during the time of apoptosis, and this will actually produce the many apoptic bodies. These apoptic bodies are nothing but these are the small vesicles and which contain the chromosome and the remnant of the cellular organelle, okay. And during the time of necrosis the inflammation is occurred, but apoptosis do not causes any of the inflammation, and usually the phagocytosis is occurred because these apoptotic bodies actually display the epitope, and which actually attract the phagocytic cell, and which actually attract the neighboring cell to be phagocytosed, okay. So this is actually called as the programmed cell death, and by this way a cells actually committed suicide, okay. In this video tutorial I have told you about the phases of the apoptosis and the differences in between apoptosis and the necrosis, and the various stages of apoptosis and the necrosis, right. And in the next tutorial video I shall tell you about the apoptosis in cases of C. elegans, and how the SAID1, SAID3, SAID4, SAID9 genes are actually involved in the apoptosis in the C. elegans, and also the three important apoptic pathway in cases of mammals, that is the extrinsic pathway, intrinsic pathway, and the granzyme pathway, okay. So thank you, and that's it.